Unpopular opinion. Building a granny flat at the back of your house is actually a dumb investment choice. Let me digress. There are some positives, but overall, the negative, the cons versus the pros is actually more worse. According to the Australian, the construction of a granny flat has skyrocketed from 4,729 granny flats in 2016 to 21,000 in 2021, and the stats are increasing because that's more than a 400% increase. Now guys, before you jump on this bandwagon of building a granny flat behind your house, you gotta think, well, yes, it's popular, but should you do it too? Well, against this popular trend, I would say no, but let's list the 5 reasons why someone would out of their mind do it. Now, in terms of the pros, in this table, I've got here the granny flat pros and cons. To do a granny flat, it's between 100 to 150 Gs. The number one pro is that there's an extra source of income. For example, in New South Wales, Sydney, you can probably get another $400 a week in terms of rental income. Number 3, you may increase value of the property, and I've highlighted over here may, which I'll talk about in the cons section. And number 4 is you diversify your risk. For example, rather than having one property with the backyard just vacant, you have now 2 properties. So one is not rented out, well, at least the other one will be rented out, right? And finally, point number 5 is a place to park your grandparents, your parents, your bloody mother-in-law, or your teenage pesky kids. So mind you, it does have pure benefits if you do have lifestyle choices. For example, you want an extra accommodation for your kids or your mother-in-law, or you just want to mitigate your risk by having extra source of income. That is fine, but is it a good use of your $100,000 to $150,000 input into this place? Which leads me to the cons. So the first cons is, well, yes, it costs 100 to 150K on average, but I've seen costs blow out in terms of doing these granny flats. Cons number 2 is not all councils allow. It depends on your block size. And I've seen a lot of people do dodgy, illegal granny flats, which then affect the future resellability of their home. So don't do that, guys. Cons number 3, contrary to popular opinion, you're overcapitalizing your property. For example, you're spending 100 to 150K on that extra granny flat behind your house. But when you do a valuation with the bank, maybe it only adds maybe 70 to 80K of extra valuation towards your property. So therefore, you're overcapitalizing. And possible cons number 4 is that you may expect longer vacancy periods for both those properties. For example, you might have 2 sets of lower socio-economic tenants in those properties, front and back, versus you could choose a very good average socio-economic tenant to live there longer. I've seen this happen. You have a person in the granny flat at the back for like 12 months lease, but then the person who wants to lease the main house will not like it because there's privacy issues. Therefore, it restricts the number of people you can rent the place to, and then you're left with the leftovers. Lastly, con number 5 is you cannot divide the property that you have right now into 2 titles if you have a bloody granny flat sitting at the back, which therefore reduces the resellability of the property due to a granny flat being stuck there, which reduces demand. So those are the pros and cons, guys. And let's not forget that granny flats are generally built in inferior locations chosen by poorly informed investors to add little value, but actually it's a poor investment choice, especially you got to dump 100 to 150K or even 200K in towards this property. The better choice is to save that 100 to maybe 150K and buy a more A-grade investment property without all that ruckus at the back, and buy something just as it is with great capital growth without all that mucking around by doing a granny flat to create the capital growth. So guys, jump in the comments, let me know whether you agree or disagree with my unpopular opinion. I'd love to read it. Either roast me or toast me.